The human soldier stumbled through the snow-laden forest with blood soaking through his torn uniform, each step sending waves of agony through his shattered leg. And he knew that if he did not find shelter within the hour, the winter cold would claim what the battle had failed to finish. Warren Royce had been running for 3 days since his regiment was massacred at the border skirmish. His supplies gone, his horse dead 2 valleys back, and now nothing remained but the desperate animal instinct to survive. The trees thinned ahead, and through the swirling snowflakes he spotted the dark outline of a structure, some kind of cabin or outpost, and he lurched toward it with the last reserves of his failing strength. The door was unlocked, which should have warned him, but desperation overrode caution. Warren pushed inside and collapsed immediately onto the rough wooden floor, his vision swimming with exhaustion and blood loss. The interior was dim and smoky, warmed by a fire that crackled in a stone hearth, and as his eyes adjusted he realized with growing horror that this was no abandoned shelter. Tools hung on the walls, furs were stacked in the corner, and a crude but well-maintained living space surrounded him. Someone lived here. "You bleed on my floor," a voice said from the shadows, and Warren's hand flew to his belt where his sword should have been, only to remember he had lost it in the river crossing yesterday. The figure that stepped into the firelight made Warren's blood run cold despite the warmth of the cabin. She was tall, easily matching his own height, with broad shoulders and muscular arms that spoke of hard labor and harder living. Her skin was a deep forest green, her eyes were a startling amber that caught the firelight, and 2 small ivory tusks curved up from her lower jaw. Black hair hung in a thick braid down her back, and she wore simple leather and wool clothing that looked handmade. An orc. He had crawled into an orc's den. "I will go," Warren managed to say, though his body refused to cooperate when he tried to rise. His leg buckled and he collapsed again, fresh blood seeping through his makeshift bandages. The orc woman watched him with an expression he could not read. She was young, he realized, probably no older than 20 summers, and there was a wariness in her stance that suggested she was as uncertain about this situation as he was. "You will die if you go," she said flatly. "You will also die if you stay, but slower." "Then let me die outside," Warren said through gritted teeth. "I will not bring trouble to your home." Something flickered in her amber eyes at that, surprise perhaps, but she crossed her arms and did not move. "You are human, soldier. You bring trouble by existing. But you also already inside, already bleeding on floor I just cleaned 3 days ago." She paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. "I am Kera. This is my home. You will not die here." Before Warren could protest, Kera moved with surprising speed and grace, closing the distance between them and crouching beside him. Up close, he could see the intricate details of her face, the way her tusks were carefully filed smooth at the tips, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the intelligence and calculation in her gaze as she examined his wounded leg. Her hands, though large and strong, were surprisingly gentle as she pulled back the torn fabric to reveal the deep gash in his thigh. "You fight orcs?" she asked, not looking up from her examination. "I fight who they tell me to fight," Warren admitted. "Your people attacked a supply convoy. We were sent to protect it. And my people say humans invade our territory, take our hunting grounds, build forts on our sacred lands," Kera replied evenly. "Everyone has story that makes them right." She stood and moved to a shelf where various clay pots and dried herbs were stored. "I do not care about politics of chiefs and generals. You bleed in my home. I fix. Tomorrow you leave." Warren watched in silence as she gathered supplies, his mind struggling to reconcile everything he had been taught about orcs with the reality before him. They were supposed to be mindless savages, brutal killers who took pleasure in violence and destruction. Yet this orc woman lived alone in a well-maintained cabin, spoke clearly and thoughtfully, and was preparing to help him rather than finish what the battle had started. Kera returned with an armful of supplies and set them beside him with practiced efficiency. "This will hurt," she said matter-of-factly, and then without further warning she poured something that burned like liquid fire directly into his wound. Warren's vision went white with agony and he bit down hard on his own hand to keep from screaming. When the world swam back into focus, Kera was already cleaning the wound with steady, sure movements, her face set in concentration. She worked quickly, applying a paste that smelled of pine and something bitter, then wrapping his leg in clean cloth torn from what looked like an old shirt. "You are lucky," she said as she tied off the bandage. "No bone break, just deep cut. Will heal if you rest and do not die from fever." She sat back on her heels and looked at him properly for the first time. "What is your name, human soldier?" "Warren," he managed through the lingering pain. "Warren Royce." "Warren," she repeated, testing the foreign sounds. "I am Kera, daughter of Gruck, but I do not speak to him anymore. I live here alone." "Why?" The question escaped before Warren could stop it, and he immediately regretted his rudeness. "Forgive me, I should not pry." But Kera just shrugged, moving to stir something in a pot that hung over the fire. "You will be here at least one night. May as well know who shelters you." She ladled something that smelled unexpectedly appetizing into a wooden bowl. "I helped human child once, 3 years ago. Small girl lost in forest, crying. I gave her water, showed her path back to her village. Her parents saw me. They say I try to eat her. My clan say I bring shame, that I am weak for showing mercy to humans. So I leave. Build this place. Live alone." The casual way she related this tragedy struck Warren harder than any weapon could have. She had been cast out, made an exile from her own people, for the simple act of kindness. He took the bowl she offered him, their fingers brushing briefly, and was startled by how warm her skin felt. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That was unjust." Kira's eyes widened slightly, her tusks catching the firelight as her mouth opened in surprise. "You are strange, human soldier," she said after a long moment. "Most would say orc got what orc deserves, or would pretend sympathy while thinking same." "Most orcs would have killed me on sight," Warren countered, "or left me to die. You did neither. That suggests we are both perhaps not what most would expect." A sound escaped Kera that might have been a laugh, short and rusty as if from disuse. "Perhaps," she agreed. She settled herself on the floor across from him, her own bowl in hand, and for a time they ate in silence. The food was simple but well prepared. Some kind of meat stew with root vegetables, and Warren found himself eating more than he had in days. The warmth of the fire, the food in his stomach, and the overwhelming exhaustion finally caught up with him. His eyes grew heavy despite his best efforts to stay alert. Kera noticed and made a dismissive gesture. "Sleep, Warren Royce. I do not kill guests who eat my food, is bad luck." When he still hesitated, she added with something that might have been amusement, "If I want you dead, I let you die outside. Easier and less mess." The logic was sound, though macabre, and Warren was far too tired to resist any longer. He let his eyes close, and within moments sleep dragged him down into darkness. He woke several times during the night, each time finding Kera sitting by the fire, working on some task or other. Once she was sharpening a knife, the rhythmic sound of stone on metal oddly soothing. Another time she was sewing something by firelight, her large fingers handling the needle with surprising dexterity. She never seemed to sleep, always alert, and Warren realized she was keeping watch, protecting him even while he lay vulnerable in her home. When morning light finally filtered through the cabin's small windows, Warren woke to find Kera crouched beside him, changing his bandages. His leg still throbbed, but the pain had diminished to a bearable ache, and when he looked at the wound, he was amazed to see that the swelling had already begun to reduce. "Your medicine is effective," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "My mother was healer," Kera said, not looking up from her work. "Before she died, I am too much shame to acknowledge. She teach me plants and treatments when I was young." She finished wrapping the fresh bandage and sat back. "You have fever but small one, should break today or tomorrow. Then you can leave." There was something in her voice, a flatness that suggested she was reminding herself as much as him. Warren struggled to sit up, wincing at the protest from his leg. "I have no supplies," he admitted. "No weapons, no food, no coin. The army does not pay dead men." "You are not dead yet," Kera pointed out. "Maybe they pay you still." "My regiment was destroyed. As far as any commander knows, we all died. And I cannot return anyway, not until I am healed enough to travel properly. The winter is too harsh and I am too weak." Kera stood abruptly, her expression troubled. "You cannot stay here, Warren Royce. I live alone for reason. Humans see me, they attack. Orcs see you, they attack. Both of us together is invitation for violence." "I know," Warren said quietly, "and I would not ask it of you, but I am stating fact. If I leave now, I will die within a day, perhaps less. I will not survive the forest in this condition." He met her gaze steadily. "I will leave as soon as I am able to do so without certain death. I give you my word." Kera turned away, pacing to the window to stare out at the snow-covered forest. Warren could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched. He had put her in an impossible position, and he knew it. Finally, she turned back to him. "1 week," she said firmly. "I give you 1 week to heal. I will share food, shelter, medicine. In return, you will help with tasks you can do while sitting. I have much work that needs doing, and winter is hard time to live alone." She crossed her arms, her expression stern. "After 1 week you leave, even if you must crawl. Understood?" "Understood," Warren agreed. "Thank you, Kera. I will not forget this kindness." "Do not thank me yet," she muttered. "Week is long time. We may kill each other before it ends." But despite her dark words, over the following days an unexpected rhythm developed between them. Warren proved useful even with his limited mobility, repairing tools that Kera brought to him, using his soldiers' knowledge to improve her defensive barriers, and carefully treating the leather pieces that she used for clothing and trade. Kera, in turn, tended his wound with diligent care, prepared meals that helped build his strength, and gradually began to talk more freely. He learned that she was an excellent hunter, that she trapped rabbits and deer to trade with a reclusive human hermit who lived 2 valleys over and who asked no questions. He learned that she had taught herself to read from books she had found in an abandoned human settlement, though her collection was small, and she treasured each volume. He learned that she sang sometimes while working, wordless melodies that reminded him of wind through trees and water over stones. She learned that he had been a farmer's son before the war, that he knew about planting and harvest and the rhythms of peaceful life. She learned that he had a sister somewhere, married to a merchant whom he had not seen in 3 years. She learned that he did not hate orcs, had never hated them, but had joined the army because drought had destroyed his family's farm and he needed to send money home. On the 3rd evening, as they sat by the fire after their meal, Kera asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. "Why do you not fear me, Warren Royce? You sleep in my home, you eat my food, you turn your back to me, but I am orc. Your people say we are monsters." Warren considered his answer carefully, turning his wooden cup in his hands. "When I first saw you, I was afraid," he admitted. "Everything I had been told suggested I should be. But then you helped me instead of harming me. You have had countless opportunities to kill me, to rob me, to hurt me. Instead, you have shown me more kindness than many of my own kind have done. I would be a fool to ignore evidence in favor of prejudice." Kera was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "You are first human who speaks to me like I am person," she said finally, her voice soft. "Not monster, not curiosity, just person." "You are a person," Warren said simply. "That seems rather obvious." She turned to look at him then, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight, and something passed between them in that moment, something neither could quite name. It hung in the air like the smoke from the fire, intangible but undeniably present. The next morning, Warren woke to find Kera preparing to go hunting. She had laid out food for him and stoked the fire high, and she seemed hesitant in a way she had not been before. "I will return before dark," she said, adjusting the bow across her back. "Do not leave cabin. Do not open door unless you hear my voice. There are wolves in area and other dangers." "I will be careful," Warren promised. Then on impulse he added, "Come back safe." Kera paused at the door, her hand on the frame, and looked back at him with an expression he could not quite read. "I always do," she said, but her voice was gentler than usual. She was gone for most of the day, and Warren found himself watching the window more than he focused on his work. He told himself it was simple caution, awareness of his vulnerable position without his host present. He told himself it was not concern, not worry, not the strange, empty feeling in the cabin without her solid presence filling it. When the light began to fade and Kera had not returned, Warren found himself unable to sit still, despite the lingering pain in his leg. He paced awkwardly to the window, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The forest was still and silent, snow beginning to fall again in thick flakes. Finally, as full dark approached, the door opened and Kera stumbled inside, her face drawn with exhaustion and something else. Pain. Warren saw it immediately in the way she moved, the way she favored her left side. "What happened?" he demanded, rising despite the protest from his leg. "Nothing," Kera said tersely, dropping a pair of rabbits by the door. "Good hunt. I am fine." "You are not fine," Warren said, closing the distance between them. "You are hurt. Let me see." "It is nothing," Kera insisted, but Warren was already reaching for her, and when she flinched away, he saw the dark stain spreading across her left side where her shirt was torn. "Kera, please," he said, his voice urgent. "You have cared for me. Let me return the favor." Something in his tone must have reached her because she finally relented, sinking down onto the bench near the fire. Warren carefully lifted the torn fabric of her shirt, revealing 3 deep gashes across her ribs, the unmistakable marks of claws. "Wolf?" he asked, already moving to gather the same supplies she had used on him. "Yes," Kera admitted grudgingly. "Found deer already dead. Did not see wolf nearby until too late. My fault for being careless." She hissed through her teeth as Warren began cleaning the wounds. "You are rough, human. You poured fire into my leg without warning," Warren reminded her, but he tried to be gentler. "Consider this payback." He worked carefully, mimicking the efficient movements she had used on him, applying the same healing paste and wrapping her ribs with clean cloth. It required her to remove her shirt entirely, and Warren tried very hard to focus only on the medical necessity, ignoring the fact that her skin was warm under his hands, that she smelled like pine and snow, and something uniquely her. When he finished, Kera pulled her shirt back on and sat very still, staring at the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are welcome," Warren replied, settling beside her. Though I hope this makes us even, I would prefer neither of us need more healing for a while." A soft sound escaped Kera, almost a laugh. They sat in comfortable silence watching the fire, and Warren became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how her shoulder was nearly touching his, how easy it would be to reach out and take her hand. He did not reach out. It would be inappropriate, unwelcome, and frankly insane given their circumstances. But he thought about it, and the fact that he thought about it troubled him deeply. The week that Kera had allotted passed, and neither of them mentioned Warren leaving. His leg was healing well, the wound now closed and only slightly tender. He could walk without aid, could move around the cabin with relative ease. By any measure, he was well enough to attempt the journey to the nearest human settlement. But winter had deepened, the snow now falling almost daily, and Warren found himself helping Kera with increasingly important tasks. He reinforced the cabin's walls against the cold, repaired her traps using techniques his father had taught him, and even began helping with the hunting, using snares that did not require him to travel far from the cabin. They fell into an easy partnership, each anticipating what the other needed, working together with a synchronicity that felt natural and right. Warren found himself smiling more than he had in years, found himself looking forward to each morning because it meant more time with Kera, more conversations by the fire, more shared meals and quiet moments. He was falling in love with her. He realized one evening as he watched her repair an arrow fletching with intense concentration, her tongue caught between her tusks in focus. The realization should have terrified him. By every law of his people, every social convention, it was forbidden and impossible. Humans did not love orcs. Soldiers did not abandon their duty. Men did not build lives with those they were supposed to consider enemies. But Warren looked at Kera, at her strength and kindness and fierce independence, and found he did not care about laws or conventions or duty. He cared about her, about the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, about how she had saved his life and asked for nothing in return, about the person she was beneath the green skin and tusks that his people feared. Kera looked up suddenly, catching him staring, and her expression shifted into something uncertain. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked. Warren opened his mouth to deflect, to make some excuse, but found he was tired of hiding. "I was thinking that you are beautiful," he said honestly. Kera's eyes went wide, her tusks parting in shock. For a long moment she just stared at him, and Warren braced himself for rejection, for anger, for her to order him out into the snow for his presumption. Instead, she said very quietly, "You mock me." "No," Warren said firmly, moving closer. "I speak only truth. You are beautiful, Kera. Your strength, your kindness, your courage in living alone out here, the way you sing while working, the way you treat all living things with respect even when hunting, everything about you is beautiful." Kera shook her head, but there was something vulnerable in her expression now, something that looked like hope warring with disbelief. "Humans do not think orcs are beautiful. We are monsters, ugly, wrong." "Then humans are idiots," Warren said bluntly, which startled a laugh out of her. "Kera, I have spent weeks with you. I have seen you in every mood, at every task, in kindness and in frustration, and I find you more beautiful than any woman I have ever known, human or otherwise." She reached up then, tentatively, and touched his face. Her hand was large and calloused but gentle, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with wonder. "You have hair here," she said, her voice filled with curiosity. "Soft hair all over your face. Orc men do not have this." Warren realized she was touching his beard, which had grown thick and unkempt during his weeks in the cabin. "It is called a beard," he explained, caught between amusement and the electric sensation of her touch. Human men grow hair on their faces. We usually trim it, but I have not had the tools. She reached up with her other hand now, exploring with fascination. What is this soft thing on your face? Kera asked, her fingers threading through his beard, her expression one of delighted discovery. It is strange, but nice, like stroking rabbit fur but attached to person. Warren laughed, unable to help himself, and caught one of her hands in his. You are the first person to ever compare my beard to a rabbit, he said. I am not sure if I should be offended or complimented. Compliment, Kera said decisively. I like rabbits, very soft, good animals. But her playfulness faded as their eyes met, as the reality of the moment settled over them. Warren, she said hesitantly, this is foolish. You are human, I am orc. Your people would kill me. My people would kill you. There is no future where this works. I know, Warren admitted. Believe me, I have thought of little else. But Kera, I do not care. I have spent my life doing what others expected, following rules that made no sense, fighting battles I did not believe in. For once, I want to choose for myself, and I choose you if you will have me. Kera's breath caught, her amber eyes searching his face as if looking for deception or doubt. You would stay here, give up your old life, live in forest with orc woman who is exile from her own people. Yes, Warren said simply. I would rather have one true day with you than a lifetime of lies anywhere else. She kissed him then, closing the distance between them with sudden decision, and Warren wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She was strong and warm, and she tasted like pine needles and snow, and kissing her felt like coming home after years of wandering lost. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Kera rested her forehead against his. I love you, Warren Royce, she said, the words slightly awkward as if she was unused to saying them. I think I have loved you since you thanked me for helping you, since you treated me like person and not monster. I am afraid of this feeling, but I do not want it to stop. I love you too, Warren replied, his hand cupping her face, his thumb gently tracing the line of her tusk. And I am afraid as well, but I think all the best things are a little frightening at first. They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing and making plans that felt both impossible and inevitable. Warren would stay through the winter at least, would help Kera prepare for spring. They would decide together what came next, whether to remain in the cabin or try to find somewhere even more remote where they could build a life without interference from either of their peoples. As they finally settled to sleep, Kera pulled Warren close against her, his back to her front, her strong arm draped over him protectively. You are small for warrior, she murmured drowsily. You are large for woman, Warren countered with a smile she could not see. Good thing I am not human woman then, Kera said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Warren laced his fingers through hers where they rested against his chest. Very good thing, he agreed, and let himself drift into sleep feeling safer and more content than he had in his entire life. The winter deepened, and with it, the bond between Warren and Kera grew stronger. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs, communicating as much through glances and small touches as through words. Warren took over more of the hunting as his leg fully healed, his soldiers' tracking skills combining well with Kera's knowledge of the forest. Kera taught him the healing arts her mother had passed down, showed him which plants could cure and which could kill, shared knowledge that her people normally kept secret. On clear nights they would stand outside together, wrapped in furs against the cold, and Kera would point out the constellations as her people saw them. The great beast, the shattered shield, the three sisters dancing. The stories were different from the ones Warren had learned as a child, but no less beautiful. My grandmother used to say that stars are souls of great warriors, Kera told him one night, her breath misting in the cold air. When orc or human or elf dies brave death, they go up to sky and become light to guide others. Do you believe that? Warren asked, his arm around her waist, holding her close. I do not know, Kera admitted, but I like to think that those we love are not truly gone. That somewhere they watch over us, hope for our happiness. She turned to look at him, her face shadowed but her eyes bright. If I die and become star, I will watch over you, Warren Royce. I will make sure you are safe and happy, even from sky. You are not going to die, Warren said firmly, tightening his hold on her. We are going to grow old together, you and I. We will watch the stars together for many, many years. You cannot promise that, Kera said, but she leaned into his embrace. World is dangerous place, especially for orc and human who love each other. Then we will face the danger together, Warren said, and we will be stronger for it. But the world, it seemed, had no intention of leaving them to their happiness. It came for them on a day when spring was just beginning to touch the forest, when the snow was melting and the first green shoots were pushing through the earth. Warren was checking the trap lines while Kera was at the river washing clothes when he heard the sound of horses and voices. He dropped flat immediately, his soldier's instincts taking over, and crawled to where he could observe without being seen. A group of human soldiers, 8 of them, were moving through the forest in a patrol pattern. They wore the same uniform he once had, bore the same weapons, marched with the same grim determination. Warren's heart seized with terror, not for himself but for Kera. If these soldiers found her, they would kill her without question. An orc living alone in the forest would be considered a threat, a target, an enemy to be eliminated. He waited until the patrol passed, then moved as quickly and quietly as he could back toward the cabin. He needed to reach Kera, needed to warn her, needed to get her to safety before the soldiers stumbled upon any trace of their presence. But when he reached the cabin, he found Kera already there, and she was not alone. 3 orc warriors stood in the clearing, all male, all armed, all regarding Kera with expressions that ranged from hostility to disgust. Warren recognized the stance of confrontation, and his hand went to the knife at his belt, the only weapon he carried. You bring shame upon our people, one of the orcs was saying in the guttural language Warren had learned to understand over the winter months. Living like hermit, hiding like coward, and now we hear you give shelter to humans, to our enemies. I shelter who I choose, Kera replied, her voice steady, but Warren could see the tension in her shoulders. I am exile. What I do is no longer concern of clan. You are still orc, the lead warrior spat. Your actions reflect on all of us. You make us look weak, make humans think we are soft. I make humans think we are capable of reason and mercy, Kera countered. Maybe that is not weakness. Maybe that is strength you are too afraid to show. The warrior's hand went to his weapon, and Warren moved without thinking, stepping into the clearing with his knife drawn. That is far enough, he said in Orcish, his accent rough but understandable. All 3 warriors turned to stare at him in shock. Human speaks our tongue, one of them said, seeming baffled by the very concept. This human does, Warren said, moving to stand beside Kera. And this human asks you to leave. Kera has harmed no one. She lives in peace. Let her be. The lead warrior's expression shifted from shock to rage. So it is true. You betray your people for human lover. You are worse than exile. You are traitor. I betray no one, Kera said, her voice like iron. I choose to live differently than you. That is my right. You have no rights, the warrior snarled. You are whatever he was about to say was cut off by the sound of shouting from the forest, human voices calling out commands. The patrol Warren had spotted earlier had clearly heard the commotion and was converging on their location. The situation deteriorated with horrifying speed. The orc warriors drew their weapons as the human soldiers burst into the clearing, and suddenly, Warren and Kera were caught in the middle of a confrontation that could only end in bloodshed. Arrows were nocked, swords drawn, and the air crackled with tension and impending violence. "Stand down," Warren shouted at the soldiers in the common tongue. "These orcs mean no harm." "That man is a deserter," one of the soldiers said, recognition dawning on his face. "Warren Royce, you were declared dead at the border skirmish." "Clearly I survived," Warren said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace while keeping himself between the soldiers and Kera. "And I was saved by this orc woman. She is no enemy. None of them need to be enemies if we all just lower our weapons and talk." "Talk." The lead orc warrior laughed bitterly. "Humans do not talk. They invade and conquer. They take our lands and kill our people. And orcs raid our settlements and murder our children," the soldier captain shot back. "You are beasts, all of you." Warren felt Kera tense beside him, and he caught her hand, squeezing gently. He could see the situation spiraling out of control, could feel the weight of history and hatred pressing down on this small clearing. One wrong move, one arrow loosed in fear or anger, and this would become a massacre. "Stop," Warren shouted, his voice carrying the command he had learned as a soldier. "Everyone just stop." He turned slowly, making sure both groups could see him clearly. "You are right," he said to the captain. "Some orcs have raided settlements, and you are right," he said to the orc warrior. "Humans have invaded orcish territories. Both sides have blood on their hands. Both sides have grievances. But what does this fighting solve? My regiment was destroyed. How many orc warriors fell in that same battle? How many on both sides will never see their families again?" "War is war," the captain said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "War is waste," Warren countered. "I have spent this winter living with an orc, learning from her, building a life with her. And I have learned that everything we are told about orcs being mindless monsters is a lie. They think, they feel, they love and grieve and hope just as we do. And I would wager that orcs are told similar lies about humans." The orc warrior spat on the ground. "Pretty words from human who betrays his own kind." "I betray no one," Warren said firmly. "I choose peace over war. I choose understanding over hatred, and if that makes me a traitor to both sides, then so be it. But I will not stand by while good people kill each other over lies and prejudice." There was a long, tense silence. The soldiers looked uncertain, their weapons still drawn but no longer aimed with conviction. The orc warriors were equally conflicted, their aggressive stances wavering. It was Kera who spoke next, her voice clear and strong. "I am Kera, daughter of Gruk, exile of the Iron Tusk clan. I have lived in this forest alone for 3 years. In that time I have harmed no human, taken no lands, raised no weapons in anger. I gave shelter to a wounded man because it was right thing to do, and I fell in love with him because he saw me as person, not monster." She looked at the orc warriors. "You say I shame our people, but I say our people shame themselves by refusing to see beyond old hatred. There could be peace if we were brave enough to reach for it. And how does orc and human living in forest achieve peace?" The warrior demanded, but his tone was less hostile now, more genuinely questioning. "It achieves nothing," Kera admitted, "but it is start. It is proof that peace is possible if we choose it." The soldier captain lowered his sword slowly. "The High Command would have my head if I returned to camp with this story," he said. "A deserter living with an orc, preaching peace. They would call me mad." "Then do not tell them," Warren said. "You came out here on patrol. You found nothing. No orcs, no deserters, nothing worth reporting. You return to your camp and we continue living our lives, harming no one. The captain looked at his men, then at Warren and Kera, then at the orc warriors. Warren could see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to determine the best course of action. Finally, he sheathed his sword. "I never liked this war," the captain said quietly. "Too many good men dead for nobles' pride and land disputes. If you want to live in peace out here, I will not stop you." He looked at his soldiers. "We found nothing." "Understood," the soldiers nodded, relief evident on their faces. They had no desire for a battle in this clearing, no wish to add more blood to ground already soaked with it. The orc warriors were slower to stand down, but eventually the leader lowered his axe. "I still say you bring shame," he told Kera, "but I am tired of death. If you want to waste your life on human, that is your choice. We will not speak of finding you here." He turned and melted back into the forest, his companions following. The human soldiers did the same, moving back toward their patrol route, and within moments Warren and Kera were alone again in the clearing. Kira's legs seemed to give out and she sat down hard on the ground, her whole body shaking with released tension. Warren dropped beside her, pulling her into his arms, and they clung to each other as the reality of what had almost happened washed over them. "We cannot stay here," Kera said finally, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Today they choose to leave us alone. But next time or time after that, we will not be so lucky. Someone will decide that peace is less important than duty, and then we die." Warren knew she was right. They had been granted a reprieve, a gift of continued life, but they could not count on such fortune again. "Where can we go?" he asked. "Deeper into the forest, further north. There are stories," Kera said slowly, pulling back to look at him. "Old stories my grandmother told me when I was small, about place far to the west, beyond the mountains, where orcs and humans and elves all live together. Place called Haven Valley. I always thought it was just story, but maybe it is real," Warren finished. "And if it is, that is where we need to be." The decision made, they spent the next week preparing for their journey. It would be dangerous, traveling through lands torn by war, passing through territories claimed by both armies. But staying was equally dangerous, and at least the journey offered hope of something better at its end. They left on a clear spring morning, the cabin locked behind them, their possessions packed into 2 large travel packs. Warren carved a message into the door frame before they left, in both human common tongue and orcish script. "Home of Warren and Kera. Friends welcome. Enter in peace." "You think anyone will respect that?" Kera asked, adjusting her pack. "Probably not," Warren admitted. "But I want to believe someone might. That maybe someday others like us will find this place and know they are not alone." They traveled west, keeping to game trails and avoiding roads where armies might patrol. It was slow going, sometimes covering only a few miles in a day, but they were cautious and careful. They encountered other travelers occasionally, and reactions were mixed. Some stared in shock at the sight of a human and orc traveling together. Some hurried past as if afraid of becoming involved in whatever strange business they represented. A few, surprisingly, nodded in understanding or even offered words of encouragement. One evening, about 2 weeks into their journey, they made camp in a small cave and were surprised when an old human woman approached their fire, leaning heavily on a walking stick. "May I share your fire?" she asked. "My own camp is cold and lonely, and I would welcome company." Warren and Kera exchanged glances, then Kera gestured to the fire. "You are welcome, grandmother. Please sit." The old woman settled herself with a grateful sigh, accepting the tea that Warren offered her. She studied them both with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You go to Haven Valley," she said, and it was not a question. "You know of it?" Warren asked eagerly. "It is real then?" "Oh yes, very real," the old woman said. I come from there, actually. Been visiting my daughter in the eastern villages. She married a farmer against my wishes, but what can you do? Children never listen. She sipped her tea. Haven Valley was founded about 30 years ago by a group of refugees from various peoples. Tired of war, tired of hatred, they went west and found fertile valley beyond the mountains. Built community there where all are welcome, so long as they come in peace. How do we find it? Kera asked, leaning forward intently. The old woman pulled a worn piece of parchment from her bag and sketched quickly. Follow the river west for 10 days. When you reach the split, take the southern fork. Follow it up into the mountains. There is a pass, narrow and dangerous but passable if you are careful. Beyond the pass, the valley spreads out like a jewel. Look for the 3 standing stones at the valley entrance. That is where guards will meet you. Tell them Marta sent you. Tell them you come seeking peace and new beginning. Thank you, Warren said sincerely. This means more than you can know. Marta smiled, her weathered face crinkling. I know exactly what it means. I am half elf, half human, and when I was young that was considered abomination. I found Haven Valley and found home. You will too. She stood, refusing their offers to stay the night, and disappeared back into the darkness as mysteriously as she had arrived. That was very convenient, Kera said suspiciously. Maybe too convenient. Maybe, Warren agreed. Or maybe there are more people in this world who want peace than we think. Maybe we are not as alone as we feared. They followed Marta's directions faithfully, and 11 days later found themselves climbing into the mountains through a narrow pass that had their hearts in their throats more than once. The path was treacherous, barely wide enough for single file, with sheer drops on either side. But Kera's sure-footedness and Warren's careful caution saw them through. When they finally emerged on the other side and looked down into the valley below, both stopped in silent awe. Green fields spread out before them, dotted with homes and farms. A river wound through the center, and in the distance they could see what looked like a small town, smoke rising from many chimneys. And most remarkably, even from this distance, they could see figures of varying sizes and colors working in the fields, walking the paths, living their lives in apparent harmony. The 3 standing stones Marta had mentioned stood at the valley entrance, ancient and weathered. As promised, 2 guards approached as Warren and Kera descended, 1 human woman and 1 orc man, both armed but not threatening. Travelers, the human woman said, what is your business in Haven Valley? We come seeking peace and new beginning, Warren said, using the exact words Marta had given them. We were sent by Marta, who we met on the road. I am Warren Royce, former human soldier. This is Kera, daughter of Gruck, exile of the Iron Tusk clan. We wish to make a life here if you will have us. The guards exchanged glances, and the orc man smiled. Marta has good instincts. She has never sent us anyone who did not belong here. He stepped aside, gesturing to the valley. Welcome to Haven Valley. All who come in peace are welcome. All who seek to build rather than destroy are welcome. All who judge people by their actions rather than their birth are welcome. Welcome home. Warren and Kera walked through the gates into the valley, their hands clasped together, and it felt like stepping into a dream. They passed homes where human children played with orc children, where an elven blacksmith worked beside a dwarven apprentice, where a mixed group sat outside a tavern laughing over drinks. They were directed to the council house, where a group of mixed leaders welcomed them, asked their story, and helped them find a small plot of land near the river where they could build their home. The community came together to help raise their cabin, orcs and humans and elves working side by side. And within 2 weeks, Warren and Kera had their own home, their own space, their own beginning. Warren returned to farming, discovering that the skills his father had taught him had not faded. He grew vegetables and grain, traded with neighbors, and found himself part of a community that accepted him fully. Kera used her hunting and healing skills, teaching others what she knew, learning from those with different knowledge. She made friends, real friends, for the first time since her exile. That first summer in Haven Valley was the happiest time of either of their lives. They woke each morning to work they believed in, spent their days with people who valued them, and fell asleep each night in each other's arms, safe and loved and home. One evening, as harvest approached, Warren found himself standing in their field watching the sun set over the mountains. Kera came up behind him, wrapping her strong arms around his waist, and he leaned back into her embrace. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her chin resting on his shoulder. "About how different life is from what I expected," Warren said. "A year ago I was a soldier fighting a war I did not believe in. Now I am a farmer in a magical valley, in love with an incredible woman with a future I actually want to see." "Magical valley," Kera repeated with amusement. "You are such romantic, Warren Royce. Can you blame me?" Warren turned in her arms to face her. "I went from dying in the snow to living in paradise, and all because you chose kindness over hatred, because you saved a stranger who should have been your enemy." "Best decision I ever made," Kera said softly, touching his beard the way she still did sometimes, with that same wonder she had shown the first time. Strange human with soft face hair. Who would have thought? Warren laughed and kissed her, there in the field they had planted together, in the valley they had found together, in the life they were building together. When they parted, he kept his forehead pressed to hers. "Marry me," he said impulsively. "I know we are already committed, already living as partners, but I want to stand before this community that has accepted us and declare formally and officially that you are mine and I am yours." Kera's eyes widened, her tusks catching the golden light of the setting sun. "Marry," she repeated. "You want to marry me, official ceremony and everything?" "Yes," Warren said firmly. "Unless you do not want to. I know Orc customs may be different and I do not want to presume." "Yes," Kera interrupted, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I want to marry you. I want everyone to know that you are my mate, my partner, my everything. Yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a ceremony that blended human and Orcish traditions, presided over by the Council of Haven Valley. Warren wore simple but clean clothes, his beard neatly trimmed for the occasion. Kera wore a dress that she had made herself, dyed a beautiful deep blue that complemented her green skin, and flowers woven into her dark braid. The entire community turned out for the wedding, filling the meadow where they had chosen to hold the ceremony. There was music and dancing, food from a dozen different cultures, laughter and joy that echoed through the valley. Warren and Kera stood together, hands clasped, and made their vows to each other in front of witnesses who celebrated rather than condemned their love. "I promise to stand beside you in all things," Warren said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "To support your dreams, to share your burdens, to love you without condition for all my days." "I promise to protect you and cherish you," Kera said, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "To build life with you, to face whatever comes together, to love you until stars fall from sky and beyond." When they kissed to seal their vows, the community erupted in cheers and celebration. The party lasted long into the night, and Warren and Kera danced together under the stars, surrounded by friends who had once been strangers, in a valley that had become home. Later, much later, as they finally returned to their cabin and collapsed together in exhausted happiness, Kera turned to Warren with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what we do next, We are happy here and this is our home, but there are others out there like we were. Alone, afraid, thinking they must hide what they are or who they love. You want to help them, Warren said, understanding immediately. Yes, Kera confirmed. I want to create way for people like us to find this place. Maybe we set up markers or spread word through travelers. Maybe we make maps or write directions. I do not know exactly how, but I know that we cannot keep this secret. Peace cannot grow if it is hidden away where no one can find it. Warren considered this, then nodded slowly. You are right. We were lucky to find this place. Others should not have to depend on luck. He laced his fingers through hers. We will figure it out together. We will help build something bigger than just our happiness. We will help build hope. And they did. Over the following years, Warren and Kera became known throughout Haven Valley as the guides. They traveled back to the lands they had fled, carefully and cautiously, leaving markers and messages for those who knew how to look. They spread stories of the valley through whispered conversations in taverns and marketplaces. They helped other mixed couples and outcasts find their way to safety. It was dangerous work, and there were close calls. Once they were nearly captured by a patrol that recognized Warren. Another time they were attacked by orc warriors who considered Kera a traitor worth killing. But they persevered, driven by the belief that every person they helped to safety was a victory against hatred and war. 2 years after their wedding, Kera discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Orc-human children were rare, the biological compatibility uncertain, and Kera's pregnancy was difficult. But Haven Valley had skilled healers of many races, and they cared for her throughout. Their daughter was born on a crisp autumn morning, and she was perfect. She had her mother's green skin, though a lighter shade, her father's brown eyes, and tiny tusks that were barely visible. They named her Mira, which meant peace in the old elven tongue. Warren held his daughter for the first time and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. This small person, this perfect blend of two peoples that were supposed to be enemies, was living proof that love was stronger than hatred. She was hope made manifest. She is beautiful, Kera whispered, exhausted but glowing with happiness. She is perfect. She is ours, Warren said, tears streaming down his face as he placed Mira gently in Kera's arms. And she will grow up in a world where no one will tell her that she should not exist, where she is loved and accepted exactly as she is. Mira grew up surrounded by love and acceptance, a child of Haven Valley who knew nothing of the prejudice and hatred that existed beyond the mountains. She played with human and orc and elf children without distinction, learned farming from her father and hunting from her mother, and grew into a bright, curious, compassionate young woman. When Mira was 5 years old, Warren and Kera made the decision to step back from their work as guides. They had helped dozens of people find their way to the valley, had created a network of safe houses and trusted allies. But they had a daughter now, and they wanted to focus on being present for her childhood. They returned fully to farm life, expanding their land, breeding horses that became known throughout the valley for their strength and temperament. They hosted dinners where their home filled with laughter and conversation, where Mira grew up hearing stories in multiple languages, learning to value diversity and perspective. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren woke before dawn and slipped out of bed carefully to avoid waking Kera. He prepared her favorite breakfast, picked flowers from their garden, and was waiting with everything ready when she finally emerged, looking sleepy and confused. "What is all this?" she asked, gesturing at the spread he had prepared. 10 years ago today, I married the most incredible woman in any world, Warren said. I wanted to mark the occasion. Kira's expression softened and she crossed to him, cupping his face in her large, gentle hands. 10 years, she repeated. Sometimes feels like yesterday. Sometimes feels like we have always been together. Both are true, Warren said, covering her hands with his own. Every day with you is new and wonderful, and yet I cannot remember a time when you were not the center of my world. They ate together as the sun rose, talking and laughing, remembering the journey that had brought them here. When Mira woke and came running out to join them, they pulled her into their embrace, the three of them tangled together in perfect contentment. "Tell me again how you met," Mira demanded, as she often did. She never tired of hearing the story. So Warren and Kera told her again. How he had stumbled into her cabin more dead than alive. How she had saved him despite every reason not to. How they had fallen in love against all odds. They told her about the journey to Haven Valley, about building their life here, about choosing love over hatred every single day. "And then they lived happily ever after?" Mira asked, even though she knew the answer. "And then we lived happily ever after," Kera confirmed, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Because we choose to every day. Happiness is not something that just happens. It is something you build one choice at a time." Warren looked at his wife and daughter, at the home they had created, at the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. He thought about the soldier he had been, lost and bleeding in the snow, convinced he was dying. He thought about the lonely exile who had saved him, who had given him far more than medical care and shelter. Kera had given him a future. She had given him love. She had given him home. And in return, he had given her the same. Two people who should have been enemies had chosen to see each other as human, as person, as worthy of love and respect. And from that choice had grown something beautiful and enduring. The years continued to pass peacefully. Mira grew into a young woman who inherited her mother's strength and her father's compassion. She became a healer, traveling throughout the valley tending to the sick and injured, beloved by all who knew her. She eventually married a kind young man, half human and half elf, and gave Warren and Kera grandchildren who filled their later years with chaos and joy. Warren's hair turned gray and then white, his beard becoming the soft silver that Kera still loved to touch. Kera's skin developed the weathered patterns that came to orcs with age, marks of wisdom and experience that made her no less beautiful in Warren's eyes. They grew old together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. On a warm summer evening, when Warren was well into his 60th year and Kera approaching her 50th, they sat together on the porch they had built onto their cabin. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter bright in the golden evening light. Mira was inside preparing dinner, and the whole family would eat together soon. "You have any regrets?" Kera asked suddenly, her hand finding Warren's as it always did. Warren considered the question seriously. He thought about the life he had left behind, the family he had lost contact with, the career as a soldier he had abandoned. He thought about the hardships they had faced, the dangers they had overcome, the sacrifices they had made. "Not one," he said finally, completely honestly. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life. I would not change anything." Kera smiled, her tusks white against her green skin, her amber eyes still as bright and beautiful as the day he had first seen them. "Good answer," she said, "because I feel same way. You are best thing that ever happened to me, Warren Royce, even if you do have very strange soft hair on your face." Warren laughed, the sound rich and deep, and pulled her close. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kera Royce, even if you do sometimes eat things that horrify me." "Grubs are nutritious," Kera protested, as she had done countless times over their years together. "And you never even try them." "And I never will," Warren said firmly. "There are limits to my love, and eating grubs is one of them." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play, listening to their daughter hum as she cooked, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built. The sun set slowly over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, and Haven Valley settled into peaceful evening. Warren thought about the terrified soldier who had collapsed in a cabin so long ago, certain he was going to die. He thought about the lonely exile who had every reason to let him die but chose mercy instead. And he thought about everything that had grown from that single choice, that single act of unexpected kindness. Love, he had learned, was the bravest thing anyone could do. Choosing to open your heart, to trust another person with your happiness, to build something together in a world that often seemed designed to tear people apart, that took more courage than any battle he had ever fought. But it was worth it. Every moment of fear, every sacrifice, every hardship, it was all worth it for this. For warm summer evenings with the person you loved most in all the world, for grandchildren laughing in the yard, for a daughter who had grown strong and kind, for a community that proved peace was possible, for a life built on love instead of hatred. "What are you thinking about?" Kera asked, squeezing his hand. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Warren said simply, "and that I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow." Kera leaned her head on his shoulder, and Warren wrapped his arm around her, and they sat together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that Kera had once told him were the souls of warriors watching over their loved ones. Warren looked up at them and thought that if that was true, then somewhere up there his parents and his old friends were seeing this moment, seeing how happy he was, seeing how well everything had turned out, and he hoped they approved. He hoped they understood that he had found what everyone searches for and so few actually discover. He had found home, he had found love, and he had found peace. Warren Royce and Kera Royce lived many more years together in Haven Valley, surrounded by family and friends, secure in their love and their life. They grew old together, cared for each other through illness and injury, and never stopped choosing each other, every single day. When Warren finally passed away in his sleep at the age of 78, Kera held his hand through his last breath, telling him softly that she loved him, that she would see him again someday, that he had made her life everything she had never dared dream it could be. She mourned him deeply, but she did not regret a single moment they had shared. Kera lived another 10 years after Warren's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, passing down the stories of her life so they would never be forgotten. She taught them about courage and kindness, about choosing love over hatred, about the importance of seeing people as individuals rather than representatives of their race or people. When Kera's time finally came, she passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, with a smile on her weathered green face. And those who were with her at the end would swear that her last word was a name spoken with infinite love and happiness: Warren. In Haven Valley, they were remembered as founders and heroes, the couple whose love had helped prove that peace between the races was not just possible but beautiful. Their story was told to children for generations, a reminder that choosing kindness and love, even when the whole world said you should choose hatred and fear, was never wrong. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings in Haven Valley, when the light was just right and the air was filled with the laughter of playing children, people would swear they could see two figures walking hand in hand through the fields. One tall and green-skinned with ivory tusks, one slightly shorter with silver hair and beard. Walking together as they always had, as they always would, bound by a love that transcended death itself. The cabin where they had first met, far to the east beyond the mountains, still stood for many years, and carved into its door frame, visible to any who might seek shelter there, were words in 2 languages. Home of Warren and Kera, friends welcome, enter in peace. And sometimes, very rarely, those who needed it most would find that cabin in their darkest hour. They would find shelter and supplies, and they would find a message that gave them hope. That love was possible, that peace was possible, that you did not have to be what the world expected you to be. That sometimes, all it took was one act of unexpected kindness to change everything. That sometimes, reaching out to touch the strange and unfamiliar, to ask with genuine curiosity rather than assume with prejudice, could lead to the greatest gift of all. That sometimes, the person you were supposed to hate could become the person you loved most in all the world. And that was how Warren and Kera's story ended. Not with tragedy or separation, but with a love that endured beyond death, with a legacy that inspired generations, with proof that choosing compassion over cruelty could change not just individual lives, but the entire world. They had reached across the divide that was supposed to separate them. They had chosen to see each other as people deserving of love and respect. And from that choice had grown something beautiful and lasting, something that proved the world could be better, kinder, more full of love than fear. Their story was proof that happily ever after was not just possible, it was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building one day at a time with patience and dedication and unwavering love. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind.